Big story that you broke this afternoon regarding the Dragons.
Yeah, it's the coaching situation which is ongoing at the Dragons. They've cast the net far and wide for the potential Anthony Griffin replacement, if that's the way they're going to go. And, you know, Dragons officials have picked up the phone in the last couple of weeks to get a gauge on the interest levels of some various candidates. And one of those is Queensland coach Billy Slater.
So, and the response being?
Yeah.
Thanks, but no thank you.
It's an interesting one. The fact that they've gone after Slater, like they did say that they're going through a process. They're going to get out there and they're going to go through in sort of methodical order of who's available, what they can offer, and then we find out today that they've had a sneaky little grab at Billy.
Well, you can't knock them for shooting for the stars, but there's more chance of all of us becoming astronauts than it actually happening, because I think if Billy was to coach in the NRL, that it would be with the Melbourne Storm, but I really don't think there's any appetite at all for Billy to be an NRL head coach.
This is part of what they said they were going to do. They said they were going to gauge some potential candidates, look at who's available, and I can't fault them for just seeing if there was an interest in Billy. That's all it went. It wasn't like they, formally offered him the job and said, if you want it, it's yours. It was, Billy, would you be interested? Words come back, no, thank you very much. And they've moved on to other candidates. And this is ahead of the board meeting next Tuesday, where the board will be given a list of potential candidates that want the job, that are interested in the job. And, from there, they'll work out what they're looking for in a coach.
This can't be a good thing, though, Michael, that it's got out, because now whoever gets approached next is going to know they weren't first cab off the rank.
It does depend on the nature of the approach, though. It's not...
It wasn't a job offer.
It's not like here's a 3-year deal for X amount of money. The job is yours if you want it. It was more, are you interested in it? Does your name go on the list with everybody else that we should have to consider? So from that point of view, you can understand where the Dragons are at. The thing is, Billy has already said he's not interested in the Melbourne job. Certainly at this moment, he's quite content doing what he's doing with Queensland and also Channel 9. But it's an interesting one. It shows you sort of how they're thinking, the Dragons.
Well, if he'd said yes, Billy, the offer would have been there within a matter of hours. And
I'm not sure. It would have been hoops.
Oh, no.
I'm with
I think if you're going to go and tap...
I'm with Kenty on this one. It was all part of the process that they're doing.
Hang on, with due respect, you're not going to go left field like that for a Queensland Origin coach and a superstar player, and then go, oh yeah, but hang on, you're going to have to be part of the tender process.
No, of course.
We'll put your name on the list of
CVs. You know how slow it works there. You know how slow it works there, Hoops. They wouldn't have just said, oh, are you interested? All right. By the next day, there's an offer. They would have gone through a process. I still believe they would have gone through a process to see who's available. And if Billy was number one on the list, then it would have fast-tracked the outcome. But I don't think it would have been had in hand, here's an offer straight away.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I tend to think they would have put him on the list. Maybe they would have shortened the list a little bit and really narrowed it down to who they're interested in. But it's still a tough one. The Dragons haven't articulated, at least publicly, what they're looking for in their coach. What sort of coach they want? Yeah, we hear other. Hear the Roosters, for example. Trent Robinson talks about playing Rooster football. We know the style that Wayne Bennett likes to play. You get Wayne Bennett in, you know what you're going to get. You know a lot with certain coaches what they're going to bring. We don't know what the Dragons, what they want their football team to look like.
Well, what your news, Michael, demonstrates, as mild an approach as it was, the end is nigh for Anthony Griffin. It's just, another sort of step along the way. And when it comes to Griffin, Ben Hunt and Blake Lawrie publicly saying they have no desire for change.
Yeah, he's been here for a couple of years now. We're building in a direction I believe is the right direction. And I think if you take away your coach, you bring a new coach in, then it's just going to start that whole cycle again. And to be honest, I probably don't have the time to start it all again. I'm getting to the back end now and I'm not really keen on starting fresh.
Reconsidering your future, is that something, if they were to part ways with Anthony, that you'd have to at least reassess, not necessarily leave the club?
Oh, look, you definitely have a think about it. And like you said, reassess maybe, but it's definitely not something that I've put much thought into at the moment.
Are you satisfied with the way the club's handling all this talk about the coaching situation?
Oh, look, I don't know if anyone ever be satisfied about things like this situation, and we all knew it was coming. It happens at every club. If you're not performing, there's going to be changing in the coach.
we don't want to go for another rebuild, and so I really want him to stay. And a lot of everyone here at the club wants him to stay, and we just want to win games. And if we win games, it'll take care of itself.
So Blake Laurie there, obviously the interesting one is Ben Hunt, Kenty, who is signed until the end of 2025, and I don't believe there's a clause that says he can get out of that contract if Anthony Griffin is not the coach. Obviously they're tight, but that wasn't exactly a table-thumping response. If you sack the coach, I want to get out of here. But at the same time, he's made it pretty clear he wants Griffin to stay.
Yeah, he did. And he also said elsewhere today that he wants to be consulted if they do look for a new coach. He'd like to be, as a senior player and the leader at the club, that he wants to be consulted. The thing I find fascinating about that is that the players seem intent that that the path they are on is the right path, and they do believe they are heading in the right direction. Now, there's a lot of noise outside the club. There's a lot of criticism outside the club. We're not all privy to what's happening within the club, but the players are fairly firm in the fact that they believe they're heading the right way. And where the Dragons can get themselves into trouble now, and this happens too often in the game, is when a coach comes in and he says, well, it's going to take me 2 or 3 years to clean out the roster and get a new roster in. Well, that's just unacceptable in the modern game. If you come in to do a job, you've got to take over the roster. You've got to come in and you're going to say, how are you going to improve this roster, and go where you got to go. Anthony Griffin's clearly got an idea of what he wants to do within the club. Now, whether it's getting there quick enough for the club is up for the club to decide. But there's every chance what Ben Hunt said there is right, that a new coach comes in, he wants to, I can't play with this halfback, I need a different style of halfback, I need a different style of fullback, or whatever his changes are. And then they get stuck in this trust issue with the club where, well, you need to give me 2 or 3 years to get the roll over the roster, let all the contracts expire, to get the new guys in. That was, for a long time, the problem with the Tigers. They just continually rolled through coaches, and every new coach came in and said, well, I can't deal with this roster. I've got to move on, and you've got to give me a bit of time. The Dragons can't get stuck in that cycle. And sometimes they're going to have to wonder whether they do bite the bullet and just trust in Anthony Griffin the same way they trusted him when they appointed him, or whether the guy that they get in to replace is the guy that comes in with the answers.
There's a blatantly obvious candidate staring them in the face, and he's been within the 4 walls of the organisation a couple of times over the course of the last few years. It's Shane Flanagan. He was an assistant there with Mary McGregor. He then took over doing recruitment for a number of months last season. Now, Flano, there are people within the Dragons who are super impressed with Shane Flanagan. He knows what success looks like. He knows how successful clubs should be run. The stumbling block is Peter Doust on the board, who is a Dragons-aligned board member. He thinks that Flano's sins of the past and his rap sheet should mean that he
doesn't get a chance
listed as a candidate, which a lot of people at the club disagree with and think that shouldn't be the case. And I've got to say, I agree.
Listen, let me just say this about Shane Flanagan. We know what happened.
He's done 5 years out of the game. Like, how long?
I agree.
How long?
My point is that move on. He's served his time. He's done his time. He did it the right way. He's come back. He's allowed back by the NRL. Why shouldn't he be allowed to coach a club? So the club shouldn't be making some moral stance there. Let's say this about Shane Flanagan too. He took over Cronulla. I think they were 14th when he took over. Within 6 years, he'd taken that team with no dominant CEO to get out in the market and do a little bit of clever negotiations to get players in the club. And without a dominant head of football, he got out there, he basically ran the roster and ran the salary cap.
Paul Gallen.
Yeah.
Gallen is the surrogate CEO. They got Luke Lewis, Andrew Fafita, they got active.
Flanagan refit the gym at one point, painted the walls. He was doing everything.
He did all that. But what he's talent identification and his roster management was pitch perfect. And he took them from 14th to a premiership. There are very, very few coaches anywhere in the game that are capable of that. And if you're a club like St George Illawarra right now, that's exactly the situation you're in. You are sitting down the bottom quarter of the ladder wondering how you're going to go north. That Shane Flanagan has already shown, without somebody saying, yeah, but he was really the guy that put the roster together, or he was really the guy, his assistant there doing the coaching. Shane Flanagan was doing it all. And he took the Sharks to a premiership. I don't know where the Dragons sit there after that and go, well, Why isn't he on the list?
The issue is, and part of the reason, look, he may well make the list. The
He's on the
CEO
list.
and the GM may decide that we will put him on the list, but where it could become an impediment is Peter Doust, and it has to be unanimous. All 8 board members have to agree on who the coach is going to be. It won't be selected by the CEO.
He's a no vote.
At this point in time, absolutely.
Furthermore,
so unless Dousty can be swayed...
So that's where other people in the club then need to start getting their ducks in a row. And before they even go down this road, this process of interviewing people and having the board meeting next Tuesday, they need to say to each other, we go in with an open mind here and we need to be prepared to change. If there's one guy that does not want to change, what's the point of having the meeting? If it's got to be unanimous and there's one guy that's all the way over here and there's 7 guys all the way over here, the meeting's useless. It's irrelevant.
If they get these next couple of decisions right, I would argue the Dragons can very quickly turn a corner and again become one of the powerful clubs that they once were when they won that premiership under Wayne Bennett. But they've got to get the positions right, Mick. They've got to get the coach right.
Of course.
They've got to get the general manager of football right, the CEO right, and whoever the coach is should probably have an influence into all of those areas because that's how they do it at the successful joints.
And they're having a conversation around a potential recruitment manager as well. They've spoken to a few people in recent weeks, but they're in a bit of a holding pattern because they don't know what to do. Do they wait for the coach to come so the recruitment manager's aligned with the coach, or do they go and hire a recruitment manager now and get back active in the player market with the Dragons?
They've got to wait.
I agree.
Well, it depends on what sort of coach they look at. If they get a rookie coach, then they're probably told to go and get their own recruitment guy. If they get an experienced coach, they're told to wait and see who he wants in the job. To me, it doesn't look like a hard decision if they're doing this. I don't know what the problem is.
And just on Shane Flanagan, it was really tough to get him back in. There was a lot of resistance to get him into that assistant coaching role, and there were some parameters put in place in his initial contract to ensure that he wasn't involved with some things because of those concerns that some people had. And they let him walk out the joint 12 months ago where they knew potentially he could have been a caretaker at some point this year or the long-term head coach.
And the fact that they put those parameters in and he came in and he quite happily sat within them and did the job and did a very good job while he was there should make them sit there and open their mind, I think, now to say, well, he's ready for the full-time job.
Well, yes, he's had indiscretions. It's been well reported, but 5 years out of the game as a head coach when you're a premiership winner, that's a heavy penalty. That's a heavy sanction and a heavy price. The NRL's cleared him.
He'll be on the list. There's no doubt. He'll be on that list come Tuesday.